Welcome back, college football fans, to another episode of Saturday Showdown. You go to College Football Podcast. And man, what a rivalry week we had this past week. Probably one of the best ones yet. And it continued the insanity of this football season that has already been insane enough as it is. And it just continued into rivalry week. And we know it's like they say, rivalry games seem to just have a different feel about them, no matter how good one team is, how bad the other team is. It's always turns into a close game, games that are you wouldn't think would be close as they were. And, we'll jump right in, and that all kind of starts on Friday. Georgia Tech. If you didn't get to see any of this game, you missed one heck of a game. Georgia wins in 8 overtimes. Yes, I said 8. They tied the longest longest game in college football with 8. And Georgia gets the win 44-42. But I mean, it's like we've said all season, this Georgia team isn't your typical Georgia team. I mean, we said it before we just jumped on here. This is probably the most overrated or overhyped Georgia team that they're 10-2. But if you've watched any of their games this season, they don't look like a team or play like a team that is 10-2. If with the play of Carson Beck late into the season, some of their defensive struggles, but they get the win here. And before we jump into some of these stats here, I mean, your initial thoughts on this game? It was one heck of a game that ran pretty late as we had all those overtimes to get through.
Yeah, me and Brandon actually talked about it on last Monday, and we both picked Georgia to win when we talked about the game. But we both did say that don't be surprised that if Georgia Tech ends up winning this game or makes it close. It's whenever you got these rival games. It's like you said, it's not just a complete beatdown on most of these teams. Like, for the most part, it's always a decently close game. Now, I wouldn't think that Georgia Tech would take Georgia to 8 overtimes and lose by 2 points. I wouldn't even think in overtime. I thought maybe Georgia would win this game by 3 or by 7, going late into the fourth quarter or whatever. But obviously, that was not the case. And Georgia Tech, credit to them, they held on for dear life as long as they could. They did everything that they possibly could do right to try to win this game. It's just one of those things that just did not turn out in their favor. So,
yeah. I mean, and if you look at it for the Georgia Tech side, I mean, this game was the Haynes King show all around for Georgia Tech. He was the offense scoring every single touchdown for the Yellow Jackets. He threw for 303 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then also counted for 24 carries for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. He was doing it all for this Georgia Tech offense. A team that's 7-5, 1-4 in conference play. Yet, like we said, conference play they struggled, but these rivalry games just hit different. And on the other side of that, we talked about a few weeks ago how the struggles that Carson Beck had, and we thought, the way his play has been down the stretch here lately, that might not bode well for Georgia. But in this game, he comes out and throws for 297 yards and 5 touchdowns. No interceptions, cleaned up, really clean game. This was just a back and forth game between these two. Like we said, going into 8 overtimes where, starting in the second overtime, you have to go for 2, and then every subsequent overtime over that, you just swap 2-point conversions. But I mean, I watched this game and it was insane going back and forth. One team would get a stop, the other one would come back and get the stop, or, one team would convert and then the other team would convert. And finally, Georgia was able to edge their way out to victory in the 8th overtime. But, now knowing going into conference championship week, they have their spot in the SEC championship game against Texas. And we'll get more into those games here in a little bit. But, man, I wouldn't have expected this game to be a 2-point game between a 10-2 Georgia team and a 7-5 Georgia Tech team.
Yeah, and like you said, or like you said just a couple minutes ago, Carson Beck. I mean, this was what a way to have your best game of the season. And and in all honesty, 5 touchdowns, and I'm really surprised that Georgia won this game. Especially when you break it down into the stats. I mean, Georgia. I mean, they were just a one-dimensional team. I mean, it was literally Carson Beck. They had no run game. I think their highest rusher had 50 yards on
11 carries for 50 yards.
so, and that was their highest rusher. Unlike Georgia Tech, where their highest rusher had 110 yards, and then behind that, their actual running back, I think, had like 13 carries for like 91 yards, somewhere around there. So, I'm really surprised that a team who is not one dimensional, that is moving the ball on both sides, loses to a team where all they could do was throw the football. And when you break the stats down, and there was 968 total yards of offense in this game, and Georgia Tech had 4 more first downs. They had more third down conversions. They ran 15 more plays than Georgia. They punted 2 times less, and they had the ball for 15 minutes more than what Georgia did. Georgia Tech had the ball for 37 minutes and 11 seconds. Georgia had the ball for 22 minutes and 49 seconds. So, they both had fumbles. Other than that, no interceptions. So they both had a turnover. But Georgia Tech had 563 total yards offense, 303 passing yards, 260 rushing yards. They averaged about almost 7 yards a play. Georgia, 405 yards, 297 passing yards, and 108 rushing yards. So I'm just really surprised, earlier in the year, Arkansas was a team like this. There's only a couple games that we actually covered where the team who basically covered everything ended up losing the game. When you look at the stats, you take the score away, you show someone these stats, and they're probably like, Georgia Tech probably won this game. Just wasn't the case. Georgia's defense was able to hold out, and Carson Beck was able to play his best game of the year, and that just happened to be just enough for Georgia to overcome. And what a time for them to overcome, because they got a big game coming up, and that'd be very detrimental to lose to your rival going into the SEC championship game. So,
yeah, 100%. That it's crazy, and Carson Beck is going to have to continue that play and maybe find a way to, take some of that confident play into the SEC championship game, because it's going to be heck of a rematch of a game we had earlier in the season. And like I said, we'll hit on it in a minute. But, I mean, he's going to have to play like this if they stand a chance against Texas in the SEC championship game. We'll jump over to another one of the big rivalry games of rivalry week, one that goes back a while. And for you, Dylan, it didn't go how you thought. We'll go ahead and get it out of the way here. Michigan upsets number 2 Ohio State 13-10 in a game that I think everybody was a little surprised at the results here. We talked about it before the show. As I saw on Saturday, the line was 19.5 point spread in favor of Ohio State. It's like we said, in a rivalry game like that, you knew that neither team was probably going to win by, much more than maybe a single score, 3 points, 7 points. To have a spread of nearly 3 touchdowns was a little bit surprising to me. We'll get your initial thoughts on, this game. It is a big rivalry game. And like we said, sometimes with rivalry games, you can just throw records out the window. And I think that's kind of what happened here in this game.
Yeah, I talked a lot of trash last Monday. I did. I talked a lot of trash. It was depressing to watch, to say the least. I thought this was the year. This is now 4 years in a row we've lost to Michigan. I thought this was the year. We were definitely the more talented team. This is definitely Michigan's worst team in the last 5 years. The last 5 years is definitely the worst team. And again, this kind of goes back to earlier in the season when Michigan kind of went on a little bit of a run and was beating some of these teams by just running the football. And that's all they did. Warren had 62. They had 62 passing yards. That's all Michigan had all game. They could not throw the ball once again, and it wasn't because our defense was stopping them. They haven't been able to throw the ball all year long. All they could do was run. And Mullings had like 32 carries for like 170 yards or whatever it was by himself. So the one thing that Michigan's very good at doing whenever they're able to actually run the ball effectively is control the tempo of the game and control the clock. And that's exactly what they did. They had the ball for over 33 minutes. They ran the ball so effectively. It wasn't 10 yards a carry here, 15 yards a carry here. I mean, it was 3-4 yards a carry consistently all game long. They were knocking down first downs. They were controlling the ball. And Will Howard made 2 massive mistakes. Now, both quarterbacks had 2 interceptions, but Michigan, on their 2 interceptions, they came at good times for them. All right. They did not come at good times for Ohio State. And there was always a momentum killer. We'd always be driving up the field, making a play, starting to get towards Michigan's red zone. And Will Howard throwing, then a mistake would happen. And that would take away all the momentum that we had just built for, 5, 6 plays, 7 plays. It was just all gone. This was definitely probably the toughest loss to swallow in the last 4 years that we've lost. It always sucks losing to Michigan, but this by far was the worst one without a doubt. There was just we couldn't do anything right. We were beating ourselves down all game long. We literally just hurt ourselves. And then I also just want to say, I know a lot of people. I didn't know if we're going to talk about this or not, so I figured I'd get it out of the way. I know a lot of people want Ryan Day's head really bad. They want his head bad. You can't beat Michigan, you don't need to be there. I don't really think Ryan Day is the problem, and I know a lot of people are probably going to clap at me for that. But he's 47-1 against every other team in the Big Ten, and that one loss came to Oregon this year. So he's 47-1. Before Oregon came around, he never lost a game to another Big Ten team. Never. He's 1-5 against Michigan. So I understand that losing to Michigan's a problem, right? I get that. But if you're going to fire Ryan Day, whatever, right? I'm not happy with him either. But you have to find someone that's going to be able to have the same success that he's having. Because even though we do lose to Michigan, we are always in a contention for a playoff or championship run. When you look at the whole Nick Saban thing, he retired. They didn't get rid of him, right? He retired. But Caleb DeBoer came in, and they thought he was going to be great. I'm not saying he's not a good coach. But this is the worst Alabama team that we've seen in the last, since I've been alive. So my whole thing is if you're going to fire Ryan Day because he can't beat Michigan, fine, right? But you have to be able to replace him with someone that's going to have the same consistency of success, especially with 12 teams being in the playoff now. Ohio State's always going to have a potential to make a championship run now. I don't think we're ever going to be ranked outside of, where we need to be to hold the spot as one of the top 12 teams. So you want to fire him, fine, but you better hope to God that you find someone who can create the same type of consistency that he's created at Ohio State. Because if you let him go and you bring someone else in and they don't do what he's been doing, you're 100% going to get crucified. So I understand Ohio State fans are mad that we can't beat Michigan. But at the same time, that's not all that I'm worried about. I want to beat Michigan, but I would rather have a national championship more than anything. And Ryan Day has kept us in that since he's been there. So that's my rant about Ryan Day.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. It's tough that you haven't these past few years, you haven't been able to get that win over your rival. That's always a big game. But like you said, other than that game, like you said, 47-1 is amazing. And, like you said, if you want to make the call to go ahead and fire Ryan Day, just because he can't beat Michigan and has lost to him 4 straight years, fine. But like you said too, the flip side of that, whoever you have lined up better be able to come in and do just as well and be able to, like you said, get those wins consistently, have Ohio State a consistently top 12 team, and then maybe they get wins over Michigan. But like you said, it could be a situation like Bama's in now where, yeah, they've been the worst that they've been in, 10 plus years, but they're still up there. But how with Alabama, that's not going to go. Like, I doubt that happens again, or there's a lot of pressure on DeBoer next year to have a better season. So same thing, the pressure is going to be on the if and we're saying ifs here. We can't, you still got the playoffs left to go through. Ryan Day still has a chance to, fight through the playoffs and make a run towards the national title. Like, all hope is not lost. Yes, you lost your rival game, but I mean, you're still squarely, you're sitting at 7 in the rankings and looking at a potential at-large bid, for the college football playoff. So yeah, it's one of those things that's always tough where, and just to kind of flip side of what you're talking about, Ryan Day having all the success that he's having but can't beat his rival. I would almost rather be in that type of situation than, just what Arkansas is going through right now. It was announced today that Sam Pittman's going to be back for his 6th season after, he had one good 9-win season, I believe his 2nd season as the head coach. But after that, we went 4-8 last year, 6-6 this year. It just seems that we're on the flip side of that saying, okay, well, just this average performance is fine, but where's the want to be better and go out and hire a coach with the resume of a Ryan Day? If Ohio State did get rid of him, he's not going to be on the market for long at all before he's scooped up somewhere else really quickly.
Yeah, but I will say, I don't want to get too far off topic, but I will say, because we lost to Michigan and he's 1-5 against Michigan now, and that took us out of the Big Ten championship game against, our rematch against Oregon. If Ohio State goes in to this playoff and they lose right away, I would say he's 100% going to be on the hot seat. 1-5 against Michigan, I think they're looking at that. I think the higher ups are looking at that more than your 47-1 against other Big Ten teams. And the fact that not only did you lose to Michigan, but that game knocked you out of the Big Ten championship game again. And if you go into the playoffs and lose right away against, you're probably going to be playing a team that that's, I don't want to say not as good as you, but probably, right? If you lose right away, I would say you're 100% probably going to be on the hot seat without a doubt. So, yeah, it was the toughest one to swallow so far. This loss was the toughest one to swallow so far. It was not a good time.
Yeah, I can probably agree with you there, especially because, like you said, up and down across the board, Ohio State was by far the more talented team. And like we said, rivalry week games get weird, and that's just what happened in this one. Aaron's got a point here. Still for flag planting, defend your stadium. That seemed also to be the theme of rivalry week, was planting the flags. And for Ohio State and Michigan, both schools fined $100,000 each for what happened after the game with the whole Michigan trying to plant their flag. It was even said that some local cops had pepper sprayed some players. Just insanity, kind of frustrations and tempers boiling over after the game when, the winning team was trying to celebrate with the whole flag planting. That, they even asked him about it yesterday, that if you look back on it, really Baker Mayfield started all that back at Oklahoma. But, so that was a situation and a theme of rivalry rivalry week as well was flag planting. But just a tidbit there is that both Ohio State and Michigan were fined $100,000 each for the incidents that happened after the game. So we'll jump on over to another game that knocked a team out of conference championship action in Miami and Syracuse. A game where, this has been the story, in several different games for Miami this season, where it's a very close game, but they find ways to, get the win late in the game and, manage to get the win and succeed here. This was a different story as Miami had went on the road in a game where it gets weird whenever you go to the JMA Wireless Dome. And that's what happened here in this game where Syracuse beats Miami 42-38. And ex-Ohio State Buckeye Kyle McCord had one heck of a game to help Syracuse, where he threw for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. LaQuint Allen, 22 carries for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns in this one. Cam Ward, still put up the numbers that we're used to seeing from him, 349 yards through the air, 2 passing touchdowns, 19 yards on the ground. But, your thoughts on this game? It seemed like a game where Syracuse just wanted it more, and they willed themselves to win and knock Miami out of the ACC championship game.
Yeah, we talked about it before we kind of jumped on. Miami's, in my eyes, they're like the Penn State of the ACC. They lose games that they probably shouldn't, right? And this just happened to be one of those games. And I even talked about it last week with Brandon when he was on. As I said, I picked Miami to win. But I said, do not be surprised, because I said they're like the Penn State. Don't be surprised if they go into Syracuse and Syracuse walks out with a victory and ruins Miami's season. And that it's kind of exactly what happened. And Miami kind of shot themselves in the own foot. They punted 3 times. They had 9 penalties for 77 yards. They were a little bit undisciplined. And then they had the fumble loss as well. It seemed like whenever they would get some momentum going, penalties would take effect. And like I said, overall, I mean, it was basically even, as far as the game went along, but it just seemed like Miami, couldn't get out of their own way a little bit. And Syracuse definitely just wanted it more. And I feel bad in a sense because Cam Ward, I'm not trying to crucify Miami here, but the only reason they are where they're at is because of Cam Ward. I'm not trying to say they're a terrible football team, but if they don't have him, I don't even think they're even being talked about where they're at. And I'm surprised he's not talked about for the Heisman. I understand you got Ashton Jonty and Travis Hunter, but this kid on a offense that's, I won't say mediocre, but I won't say it's completely high-powered. He has over 4,100 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions on the season. And he's averaging an 88 QBR a game, which is number 1 in football, college football right now. So it's just kind of sad to see because he's literally every game he has literally gave it his all. Every game, every minute of every second, all season long. And now they're on the bubble and their season is kind of just going to teeter. And I will say, if Clemson loses, that will give Miami and Alabama their best shot to get in. And I will promise you right now, and this is coming from a guy who absolutely hates Alabama, if I'm the committee and I have to choose between a 3-loss Alabama team and a 2-loss Miami team, and I look at who Miami has played and beaten, and I look at who Alabama has played and beaten, I'm probably going to pick Alabama every time. I understand they have 3 losses, but their wins are better than Alabama's or than Miami's. So, I mean, no, this is an Alabama team that did beat Georgia, who is in the SEC championship game, and that's probably going to be the big game that they look at if it comes down to those two. So it just sucks because Cam Ward, he's had a heck of a season. He's had it's been more of that. I mean, he's had an incredible season. So it just sucks that Miami had to go out like that. They're literally one game away from an ACC championship game. They just kind of got in their own way a little bit. So,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, like you said, to see which way the committee will go, especially, if you have Clemson come out and lose the ACC championship game. They come out and win it, but that still makes it tough because then you have SMU that essentially ran the table in the conference and then made it to the conference championship game and lost. But we'll get more into that in a little bit. But yeah, I can see what you're saying, where if you just look at strength of schedule and who each team's played, I can see where you lean more towards the Alabama over the Miami in that situation. So we'll continue on here in rivalry week. You had a long-awaited rivalry game between the Texas Longhorns and the Texas A&M Aggies that ultimately this game decided who was going to face Georgia in the SEC championship game. And Texas gets the win here 17-7. Another close game where we talked about some of these games you might not would have thought to be as close or predicted to be what they were, end up being a lot closer. I mean, this game was closer to being accurate than some of the others. They had Texas favored by 4.5 in this game. Just an average game from Quinn Ewers, nothing spectacular. He comes out, throws for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, rushes for 29 yards on the other side of the ball. Marcel Reed, the quarterback for Texas A&M, that they've been playing quarterback flip-flop all season between Marcel Reed and Connor Wegman. And, ultimately after the big win against LSU, that kind of cemented Marcel Reed to lead the way the rest of the way. And he went 16 for 23, 146 yards and an interception, 60 yards on the ground. Nothing spectacular there. Really what helped Texas in this game was kind of like a little bit what we talked about between Ohio State and Michigan is Texas dominated the run game in this one. Quintravion Wisner, 33 carries, 186 yards in this game. They relied on him heavily. No touchdowns. That came by Archie Manning, who got 3 carries for 14 yards and a touchdown. Other than that, it was a ground and pound typical, I think, what you'd see in an SEC game. Run the ball, run the clock, and they were able to get the win here. It was late in the game. A&M is on their goal line, or A&M's on the goal line trying to score, and instead of taking the field goal that would have made it 17-10 on 4th down, they tried to just run it up the middle and get absolutely stuffed and turn the ball over on downs, and that kind of all but sealed things for Texas there. So, I mean,
yeah,
your thoughts on this game? I mean, it's going to be an interesting one in Atlanta this week.
And they did that not once, not twice, but 3 times. So not only did Texas A&M have a fumble loss and an interception, so there's 2 turnovers as it is, but they went 0 for 3 on 4th down. So there was 3 more. There was 3 more turnovers just right there. That's 5 for the total game. So you have an interception of a fumble, and you failed 3 times going forward on 4th down. I don't know what Texas A&M. I mean, you would think for not having this game in a while, you would think you'd come out and do whatever you possibly could as the head coach to try to win this game and take every opportunity to beat away at that score, right? No matter what's happening. And they just didn't do that. They got greedy. They wanted it all every time they got in the red zone. It comes down to 4th down. I don't know why you don't kick the field goal and just make it a 1-score game. Instead you fail, turn it over on downs, and now it's still a 2-score game. So, they they kind of got in their own way again. They had 6 penalties for 60 yards. They had the 5 turnovers. Texas, they won the game on the ground, 186 yards. They had the ball for almost 35 minutes. They did very well, man. That Wisner is the running back. They leaned on him all game long, and he did not disappoint. He was picking up first downs left and right. They had 26 first downs at Texas A&M's 15. So they were constantly eating away. It was very similar to the Michigan-Ohio State game. They literally said they got the ground game going, and they said, if you're not going to stop it, then we're just going to keep doing it. Texas A&M had no answer whatsoever, and Texas just said, fine. I mean, if you're not going to do anything about it, we're going to keep feeding him the ball. And they did all game long, and it worked out, and it was perfection every time. The man was getting 3, 4, 5 yards of carry every time. Getting 5 yards of carry, he carries the ball twice. I mean, you're talking a first down every 2 plays. That's basically what he was doing the whole time by himself. So credit to Texas. I thought Quinn Ewers played subparly. I'm not going to lie. If he plays like that against Georgia, I would say it's probably going to not end up the way that they're hoping. Quinn Ewers is going to have to play. I'm not going to say Georgia's going to be like the best team out there, but he better play better than 218 yards, a touch, 1 touchdown and an interception. So he's going to play better than that. But overall, good job by Texas. They controlled the ground game all game long, and they got the job done.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, like you said, 3 different times that A&M went for it on 4th down and turned it over. They went for it on 4th and 1 on their very first possession of their very first drive of the game, where they had it at the Texas 10. I get wanting to make a statement early on in the opening drive and try to go for it and get the opening touchdown. It's a tough call. I'm not in a head coaching position, but almost at that point, let me just kick it, take the early 3-0 lead, and get the points on the board. But I also get the other side of it where it's a rivalry game. You want to say, okay, we're going to score here first, set the tone, but ultimately don't pick up that 1 yard that they needed to get the first down inside at the Texas 10.
Yeah, well, and you lose all the momentum, too, instantaneously. I mean, all the momentum's gone. You drove up the field, you did all that work for what turns out to be nothing. If you end up kicking those 2 field goals, now it's a 17-13 game. And now it's a 4-point game. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're this close. And I understand you don't know how a game's going to play out, especially when that's your first drive of the game. You don't really know how the game's going to play out. But you would think playing against one of the best teams in the SEC right now, one of the best teams in college football right now, you would think you would take any point that is given to you, especially when this team is not going to give you a whole lot of opportunities to score. Everything counts. Everything matters. And I understand you want to make a statement, like you said, Caleb. I get that. You're trying to make a statement over these guys. You want to make a big impact. But all you did when you failed in that 4th and 1 is all the momentum that you built that whole drive, gone. It was gone instantaneously. And you just handed it over to Texas because now they're hyped and ready to go because they just stopped you in the red zone. And now they kind of got it. Now they kind of got it in your head that when you get down here, it's not easy peasy. So if you can't gain 1 yard, you're not scoring. So it just, it was definitely that was definitely a big turning point in the game. And that was on the first drive of the game. And it was a big turning point. So.
Yeah, 100%. That's a tough call to make. It's like they say, hindsight's always 20/20 when you're looking back at, you should have done this, could have done that. It's always a tough one. Before we start talking about conference championships, we'll jump over to the last big significant game of rivalry week that had playoff implications, and that was South Carolina and Clemson. South Carolina getting the win 17-14 over Clemson, and this game was the battle of the quarterbacks on the ground, where both these quarterbacks scored 2 touchdowns on the ground for their teams. Each one threw an interception. Lenore Sellers for South Carolina threw 164 yards and 1 interception, but on the ground had 16 carries for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the other side, that Cade Klubnik for Clemson threw for 280 yards, 1 interception. On the ground, went 10 carries for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. with a decisive field goal in between there. But when you look at it, and this was a fun game to watch. Lenore Sellers won the game for South Carolina, having that late touchdown run to kind of seal the deal. And also, before Miami's loss, honestly knocked Clemson out of the ACC playoff game. You look back at the Syracuse Clemson game. If you missed it, the post game, Syracuse coach said, Dabo Swinney, you're welcome for helping you get to the ACC championship game after knocking off Clemson. But man, what a surprise game this was, especially, for me looking at South Carolina, who wasn't necessarily, I don't think, picked to be this good this year, and a Clemson team that kind of maybe fell short of expectations of what you would think a Clemson team would do on the season. Yet, by the way things worked out, they're still in the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I mean, credit to South Carolina. I got nothing to say. The game was basically even. Sellers made that late drive to win the game. The game came down, to that last drive, late in the game, and at that point in time, it is offense against defense. It is, we're going to throw everything at you. Can you stop us? It doesn't matter what you did all game long. Doesn't matter how close the game is. When it comes down to this is it. It's basically us against you. And South Carolina was able to get it done. Surprisingly, they had 2 fumbles. They had an interception. They had 7 penalties for 66 yards. On the flip side, Clemson, only had 3 penalties. They're definitely more disciplined. And, they had 3 turnovers as well. They had the fumble loss. They had the interception. And they went for it on a 4th down conversion and failed that as well. So a lot of turnovers in this game, a lot of momentum changes, a lot of momentum shifts, swinging back and forth constantly, a lot of lead changes. It was a great game overall, especially if you didn't get to watch it. I would highly recommend maybe going back and watching like a quick overview of the game. It was great. But yeah, luckily for Clemson, Syracuse did the Lord's work for them and knocked off Miami because, like you said, Caleb. South Carolina basically knocked at that point in time and knocked Clemson out. And Syracuse, like I said, did the Lord's work for them and knocked off Miami, which I don't think anybody was, honestly thinking, it was 100% going to happen. And Clemson, even with the loss of South Carolina, sneaks in. So they're going to have to play they're going to have to definitely play a sharper game because SMU is very good. So they can't have 3 turnovers against SMU. It's probably not going to go their way if that was to happen. So,
yeah, 100% there. You just look at it that the game-winning touchdown for South Carolina, they were 3rd and 16, and Lenore Sellers just takes it 20 yards to the house on a 3rd and 16. You would have never thought, a quarterback draw play, or not necessarily design draw anyway, on a 3rd and 16 play would have been the game winner for them. Clemson gets the ball back with 56 seconds left and is driving down the field. And at the South Carolina 18, Cade Klubnik throws an interception that kind of sealed the deal. Tough way to lose there. You're down there at the point, 2nd and 10. So you're not even thinking about, maybe I just kick a field goal and tie it. You're trying to, go for the win, and your pass gets picked off, and, that's the game. So big time game by South Carolina, though. Congrats. I know they're a potential team that is on the bubble for a potential playoff slot. They're ranked 15 coming into this week, but, some of that's going to change with conference championships and results of those. So, still, keep an eye out on some of these teams that are right there on the outside looking in for these playoff spots. And we'll go ahead and jump over to conference championship games that is occurring this week. They're going to be getting kicked off on Friday, where you have the Mountain West Championship game, Boise State, UNLV. This is going to be essentially if Boise State can get the win here, they punch their ticket as the power or the group of 5 team seed, essentially. If UNLV gets the win here, they're sitting at 11-2, winning the Mountain West, and they're right there on the bubble of potentially getting in. We look at it right now. You see Ashton Jeanty on the season, 312 carries for 2,288 yards and 28 touchdowns, and has his team in the Mountain West Championship game.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say Boise State's probably gonna win this game. I'm not saying UNLV can't stop them, but no team, right, has been able to stop Ashton. Nobody, not a single team, not a single team has been able to stop him. Teams' versions of stopping him is like holding him to like 150, 160 yards. That's not really stopping a running back. That's just minimizing as much damage as you possibly can. That's just damage control. That's all that is. And I would say that Boise State's not going to differ away from their game plan, and it's still going to be feed the Jeanty show, Ashton Jeanty. Feed him as much as we can. And if you guys want to beat us, you guys are going to stop him. And considering, like I said, no team has really stopped him at all, I don't really see that happening. So I would say Boise State wins this game, and they punch their ticket as everyone's dark horse, I think, to hold their spot in the college football playoffs. So,
yeah. So if you look back at it, this is another one of those rematches where this was probably the closest game that Boise State played all season, where they got the win over UNLV 29-24. And like you said, UNLV's version of limiting Ashton Jeanty was 33 carries for 128 yards and 1 touchdown. Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to be able to go back and look at a lot of other tape, but it's not easy to, stop this man. You've seen him once before, so you have that experience of going up against him previously. But going into this game, with this conference championship, this is one of those weird conference championships where the game is going to be in Boise at Albertsons Field or Stadium on the blue turf, where Boise State's favored by 4.5. I mean, so it's essentially a home game for Boise State. Unlike, a neutral site game for some of these other conference championship games. So I'm like you. If I had to pick, it's Boise State punching their ticket here as the dark horse candidate for the college football playoffs. As you jump over to the American Athletic Conference, the AAC, Army and Tulane. Army is in this championship game, 10-1 on the season. What a season it's been for Army. Their one lone loss coming to Notre Dame. Coming in this game, it's at Michie Stadium in West Point, so this is going to be a home game for Army as well in their conference championship for the American against Tulane, who is ranked 17th and 9-3 on the season. They are coming off of a loss against Memphis 34-24, where they have Tulsa favored by 3.5 in this game. It's an interesting one to look at where if you have Army win the AAC at 11-1, do they have a potential chance to, for a spot, or does Tulane? They're ranked 17. They're right outside, that 12 spot. But if they win their conference, does that make a case for them to potentially maybe try to sneak in for a spot?
Yeah. If I had to pick a winner of this one, I'm not gonna lie, I probably will not watch this game. But if I had to pick a winner of this game, I'm gonna go with Army. Tulane's coming off a tough loss to Memphis, so I mean that's already detrimental enough. Especially going into the championship game, you're coming off a loss, you're not happy. There's some things you want to change, but on top of that, not only are you coming off a loss, but everything is against Tulane. You're coming off a loss, a game you probably shouldn't have lost, right? You're going into a championship game. You're playing Army at you're playing them at their own at their own home, and you're going up against a team that's not your typical college football team, right? They specialize off the RPO. And if you're not prepared for that, things can get ugly very, very quick, right? There's been really one team that's been able to really stop Army, because they were just ready for it. And I think a lot of that had to help because they played a team earlier in the season to get ready for that. They played Air Force early in the season to get ready for that. That was Notre Dame. So they had seen an RPO type of team already, and I think that kind of helps. But when you go up against a team that you're not fully prepared for, and their quarterback has like 21 rushing touchdowns on the season, by himself, it's not gonna be an easy game for Tulane to win. That RPO is a different monster. Like I said, if you don't have the type of defense to stop it, it could get really ugly really quick. So I would say all the momentum and all the favor is in the direction of Army right now. So if I had to pick a winner, I would say Army. But I also just want to say, like you said, do not put Army in the college football playoffs. Don't do that. Don't do that. I understand what I just said, right? But Tulane is not Texas. They're not Georgia. They're not Ohio State. They're not Boise State. They're not Oregon, right? You put Army in the college football playoffs and they go up against any of these teams, it is going to be the Notre Dame game all over again. They're going to absolutely – that is where talent and NIL starts taking place, is because you get in the college football playoffs, you better be ready because you're not playing against – the easy teams that are on people's schedule. Like, you're playing the best teams in college. And I promise you, if Army would get in, any team that is in there is probably going to put the hurt on you. The RPO is not going to work against an Ohio State, against a Boise State, against a Texas, against a Georgia, against an Alabama, against a Tennessee. It's just not going to, that's just not going to do it. A one-dimensional offense is just not going to win you a game against these guys. But for the sake of championship games, I'm going to say Army wins this game. I don't know how close it'll be, but I feel pretty confident saying Army's going to win.
I'm right there with you with Army. If you look at their emphasizing one-dimensional is what you have to say, because you look at their quarterback, Daly, has thrown only 860 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns, 1 interceptions. But on the ground, he has 240 carries for 1,348 yards and 25 touchdowns.
25 touchdowns.
So, like you said, RPO 100% of the way for this Army team. I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to pick them here to win the AAC over Tulane. Tulane, like you said, is coming off that loss. That's going to be tough. They'll have to bounce back. And who knows, but like with it being at Army Stadium, they're coming off a win themselves. Give me the Black Knights to win the AAC. We'll jump over now to the Big Ten championship game. You have Penn State taking on Oregon in Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. We're starting now to talk about the teams that are playing at neutral site games. Oregon comes to this game favored by 3.
By 3?
The spread is 3.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
For this conference championship game. We've seen this this Oregon team take care of business all season. Their closest game of the year, Ohio State 32-21, and then Wisconsin 16-13. Other than that, the rest of their games weren't even close. Penn State, on the flip side, we talked about it. Fantastic season for them. Can't get the big win they needed against Ohio State, but Michigan helps them out and gets them to the Big Ten championship game against Oregon. And I mean, if we're being honest, I don't see how you don't have Oregon favored by more than 3 in this game with just what they've done on the season. You look at Dylan Gabriel, 3,275 yards through the air, 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. James on the ground, 206 carries for 1,166 yards, 13 touchdowns. And Tez Johnson, your main receiver, 685 yards receiving for 9 touchdowns on the season. I don't know. According to the matchup predictor and ESPN analytics, Penn State has a 53.8% chance to win this game. Where they're coming up with their analytics, I have no clue. If you've watched this same Oregon team, me and you have all season that's 12-0, I don't know. I mean, to me, to me, it's an easy pick here to say Oregon's going to win the Big Ten championship game, their first season in the Big Ten.
53% chance to win. Okay, buddy. Yeah.
What does ESPN and Vegas know that we don't?
Okay, well, this is all I got to say. This is all I got to say. It's not even Oregon's offense that should be scary, right? Oregon has been the same team for the last million freaking years on offense, right? They throw the ball, they run the ball, they're all really, really super fast, and they can score a lot of points. But their defense has been playing so well lately, which is very unusual in my eyes for an Oregon team, because the only way they beat a lot of these teams is because they can put up 30, 40 points a game, and the other team just doesn't have enough talent to do that. Their defense is playing really well. Ever since the Ohio State game, their defense has played really well. They did only hold Wisconsin to 13 points. But minus that game where it's kind of a struggle, they're playing really well. And the fact now that you have an Oregon team where their defense is playing really good and their offense is still the same Oregon offense, I think they're going to absolutely blow Penn State out of the water. I honestly, I understand the championship game has the potential to be close, but I don't think it's going to be a 3-point game. I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon wins by 14. I don't think Penn State I don't think they have the talent to keep up with Oregon, to be honest. I know I make some bad calls sometimes, don't get me wrong, especially this last week, the Ohio State, Michigan, but I just don't see how you can only have Oregon favored by 3. I just don't. I understand Penn State is a good team. I really do get that. They do have a really good defense, and they have a good offense. But I just don't think that they're going to be able to keep up with Oregon. I don't think the defense is going to be able to keep up. They haven't played a team that has the speed of Oregon. Okay, and Oregon's defense, I think, is so much better, and they're going to be able to put so much hurt on that Penn State offense. Without even thinking about it, you can give me Oregon for the win, and I'm going to say it's double digits. I'm going to say it's a double-digit win.
Yeah, it's an interesting take to see the odds and the spread for this game. I'm with you, though. I think Oregon wins it here. We've already seen it once this season, like we've said. Penn State seems to be that team that they can have a great season, but can't get over that hump and win the big game. They already whiffed once and couldn't beat Ohio State earlier in the season at their home turf, where was probably, like we talked about, they're probably their best chance to get a win in that matchup, and they can't get it done. And I don't think they get it done here in Indianapolis in Lucas Oil Stadium in the Big Ten championship game. And Oregon will move to 13-0 on the season. As we continue on here, we jump over to the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship game, and a surprise of I didn't expect either of these teams in this game. You have Iowa State taking on Arizona State in AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Jerry World, for this matchup. Arizona State favored by 1.5 in this game. Arizona State coming off a rivalry week win over Arizona 49-7. So they didn't just win, they dominated in that game. They beat BYU, who we all kind of really thought the way their season was going to line up to be in the Big 12 championship game. They beat BYU. Iowa State coming off 3 straight wins after 2 tough losses to Texas Tech, Kansas. You got Rocco Becht for Iowa State, 3,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Levitt for Arizona State, 2,444 yards, passing 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Scatabo for Arizona State, 1,398 yards on the ground, 17 touchdowns. This is going to be an interesting game. Arizona State, their leading receiver, 1,100 yards on the season receiving with 10 touchdowns. From what they've done this season, they seem to have gotten hot at the right time. And, man, this is going to be, I think, a fun game to watch. And give me Arizona State in this one. Let the Sun Devils keep rolling here over Iowa State.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Arizona State, 5 wins in a row. They beat Oklahoma State, beat UCF, then they beat Kansas State, who's ranked. Then they come in and beat BYU, who is ranked, and Arizona, who at the beginning of the year, they were ranked, and they were playing pretty well. So Arizona State's on fire. They're playing really well. Like you said, all it takes is for you to keep yourself in that zone and then catch fire at the right time. And it seems like Arizona State has done that. So I think it's probably a decently close game. Probably one score. I'm going to say a touchdown probably separates it. I understand Iowa State's a good football team. I just think Arizona State's better, and I think they're playing better at the right time. So give me Arizona State to win this game.
Yeah, in agreement there. As we jump over to the SEC championship game, you have 10-2 Georgia taking on 11-1 Texas, with that one being a loss to Georgia. So you're getting a rematch here in this SEC championship game in Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta. Texas, the odds are even. Neither team favored in this game as of now. Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, round 2. Like we talked about, Carson Beck on the season, 3,400 yards through the air, 28 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. Quinn Ewers, 2,300 yards through the air, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Beck had that little stretch there where he just looked absolutely terrible. Quinn Ewers hasn't played as great ever since his injury he had, that oblique injury. I honestly don't know what to expect in this game. It's going to be a matchup, where essentially it was a home game for Texas. Well, now this championship game is in Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, the closest to a home game you're going to get for Georgia, even though it's in not their home stadium. Like we said, Georgia coming off that 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech. Texas coming off the win against Texas A&M, 17-7. What are you thinking here for this championship game?
Give me Texas. Give me Texas to have the redemption win. They were able to stay in the game last time against Georgia a little bit, but Georgia kind of just pulled away towards the end of that game. I understand Carson Beck had a pretty good game against Georgia Tech, but I feel like he's not throwing 5 touchdowns against the Texas defense here, and I'm gonna take the odds of him playing bad over the odds of him playing good in this game. So I personally think he's probably going to make a few mistakes in this game, and that's probably going to cost Georgia the football game. Their defense hasn't been playing as of well lately throughout the season. Their defense is still good, still on the top, in football. They just haven't been playing as well. And I think Texas is going to be able to do just enough this time around to get it. I understand it's more of a home game for Georgia, but I think Texas is probably hungry. I think they understand the implications of this game. They understand that not everybody gets a redemption game, especially on a massive stage like this. So I'm going to say it ends up being a 3 to 7 point game, but I'm going to swing it in the favor of Texas.
Okay. I can see that. That's tough. I honestly don't really know which way I want to go for this game. It's a tough one.
He hates both teams.
Yes, I do. But I think I probably hate Texas more. I don't want to see them win the championship game their first year in the season. So give me Kirby Smart and that Georgia team to go 2-0 this season against Texas. I think that Georgia defense comes out, knowing what they did against this Texas team last time and ready to do it again. Neutral site game. I will agree with you. I think it's probably a 3 to 7 point game. That's going to be close. The over under for that game is 50.5. Don't know if we're quite getting there. I could see this being a similar game to what Texas had before, with it being a 17-7 or like a 17-10 or 17-14 game. It could be really close. But I'm going to take the Dogs to win this one. And, I think if Georgia wins this one, Texas still probably makes the playoffs, sitting at 11-2. And Georgia gets in with that automatic championship bid. And you have those two SEC teams in the playoffs. And finally, we will wrap up championship week with the ACC championship game, where you have the 11-1 SMU Mustangs, their first year in the ACC, moving over from the AAC. That's not confusing at all. But to take on Clemson, who, like we said earlier, is lucky to be in this ACC championship game. All thanks to Syracuse taking care of business and getting the win over Miami. Clemson favored by 2 points in this game. This is going to be in Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina. 35-degree at kickoff. Over under 53.5. You have Clemson coming off that loss to South Carolina in a rivalry game. You have SMU coming off a 38-6 win over Cal. This is going to be a tough one. I want to say SMU will continue to, keep this amazing season rolling, where, they had that loss to BYU early in the season, but have just rolled through conference play. No big deal. Had a close call with Duke in overtime, 28-27. But, not many close games for this SMU team. And they haven't played Clemson all season. So this is a fresh matchup, not a rematch of any type. So these teams are going to see each other for the first time. What's your thought going into this ACC championship game?
I like SMU. Clemson, no offense, doesn't even deserve to be here. They got out of here. They got here out of sheer luck and a massive help from a Syracuse team. Should be Miami, sitting in their spot. So you would think that a team, knowing that they shouldn't be here, would make will make the most of it. But I think this is a very subpar Clemson team. No offense to Dabo Swinney, I don't think they're 100% very well coached right now. I think some of the coaching has been a little oddball. Some of the plays have been pretty bad. Some of the play of Clemson has not been very great. I'm not going to say they can't come in and win, because Clemson has been playing better as of lately, especially on the run game. Their running back is phenomenal. But I just think SMU probably keeps it rolling and gets the job done here. But it wouldn't surprise me if Clemson does end up making the most of this and does take out SMU. That would not surprise me. But I like SMU. They got a hot hand. They've been rolling. So I'm going to take SMU for the win.
Yeah. Vid's out here kind of taking some shots to Miami here. He said it ain't about who's in the ACC Conference Championship game. It's about who's not in it, and it is not the U. So, that's true. Miami should be in this game, but they're not. They couldn't get the simple job of getting the win against Syracuse done. But I'm right there with you. I like what SMU has been doing all season. You look at Smith on the ground for them, 1,100 yards on the season, 14 touchdowns. Jennings taking over, 2 to 3 games into the season and still going for 2,700 yards through the air, 19 touchdowns. Klubnik, his stats, I think make him look a little bit better than what his play's been. 3,000 yards through the air, 29 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But he just hasn't seemed to be that overwhelmingly, the guy, if you will, like, Clemson had with Trevor Lawrence. And I know there's only one Trevor Lawrence, or if you think before him, Deshaun Watson at Clemson in his Clemson days, that they were really good. DJU, K. Klubnik was the reason he left, because he was going to be there next, the guy. And I don't think it's 100% been there, but like you said, the way Dabo has run this team, he's stuck in his way and doesn't necessarily want to, usually he doesn't want to embrace the portal. Like, that's the name of the game now. He's still recruiting guys, developing guys. And I think you may be starting to see a little bit of where that's backfiring a little bit on the success Clemson's having, where you see some of these other schools that, maximizing the effort of the portal and having the ultimate success. Vid says here, you kids are too young to understand the SMU from back in the day. They were one of the few schools to get the death penalty. I know of what you're talking about there. Like you said, yes, that's before my time. But, SMU has really built back themselves, making the move from the AAC to the ACC, and then running the table essentially in conference play and making championship games big for them. And that's going to be my pick. SMU, I'm going to say they continue to keep it rolling here and win the ACC championship.
Yeah, SMU got the death penalty because they were, they went against recruiting violations. So, I mean, yeah, they just it was just for recruiting violations, and that was back in like the 1980s, I think.
Yeah. And so as we wrap up here, we're going to look at it. Here are the college football updated predictions based on who they think will win their championship games. And so they're going to say, they're saying Oregon wins the Big Ten championship and gets the Big Ten seed. I can agree there. Texas is your SEC championship. That's very probable. That has a chance to be a close game there. SMU, your ACC champion. Boise State, your best of group of 5 champion. And then they're saying Penn State will be your 5 seed, taking on Arizona State.
Good
who
game.
would be your Big 12 championship or champion. Notre Dame gets the 6th seed, the highest seed that they can get, I believe, or maybe they can get up to 5 because it's 4 conference auto bids. They have Notre Dame work their way up, even after that terrible loss to NIU early in the season, to the number 6 seed, taking on number 11 seed Miami. So they're saying Miami still gets in at the 11th seed. They're giving Georgia the 7th seed after losing in the SEC championship game, and they will be taking on a 10th seed Indiana.
Oh, sweet mother of Lord. Sorry, Indiana.
All right, are we looking at a similar game to Georgia TCU several years ago?
Yeah. Indiana will not. I don't. Yeah, that would not be in favor of Indiana.
And then the final matchup they're predicting here is number 8 Tennessee versus the number 9 Ohio State.
That'll be a really good game. Because Tennessee has a really good defense. Their offense is hit or miss sometimes, but so is Ohio State's apparently, because they can't do anything against Michigan. So, it seems like I think our offense is better, but Nico Lamaliva, he also has a lot of good games. His kid's got a cannon. He's very mobile. I think it's a lot of the same team, and that'd be a really good game. Tennessee against Ohio State, if that was actually to take place, that would be a very interesting game.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see where they end up doing the seedings and who, because this could all be different with, if Clemson wins the ACC, you still have SMU getting in, whereas that scenario we just went through, Clemson wasn't in. But I don't think if Clemson were to win, I don't think you exclude a 11-2 SMU team. So it's still going to be up in the air a little bit based on, what happens in some of these championship games, I think. Because you're not going to, like we said, you're not going to leave out a 11-2 SMU. You're not going to leave out an 11-2 Texas game. Say they lose to Georgia. Georgia gets in with the automatic SEC bid. Well, you're not going to leave out Texas.
No.
I don't think.
No. Mark my words, they're going to find a way to get Alabama in. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to do it. If the stars align.
Yeah. If Penn State somehow beats Oregon, Oregon's still getting in. 12-1, you're still getting in. But then Penn State gets in with the automatic bid of the Big Ten championship. So, yeah. I mean, it's not all set in stone yet, folks. I mean, this Saturday could change a lot of things with, if you have some unexpected results here. I mean, Iowa State beats Arizona State, they get in. And I think that's one of the few games where no matter who wins, it's only the winner that's getting in there.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And then, yes, Boise State's your dark horse for your group of 5. But say they lose, then who's your group of 5 that gets in? Because now you got to consider, is it still Boise? Is it UNLV that beats Boise? Or if Tulane beats Army, does Tulane get in?
Yeah, if Boise State loses, that could be
throws a wrench in the.
That could be interesting for them because, I mean, I don't know if you get in.
Because if you look at it, Boise State's only other loss, if they lose there in the championship game, would be to Oregon.
Yeah, that would throw a wrench in a lot of things if Boise State would lose. There could be a lot of craziness happen. A lot of teams get thrown around if a lot of weird things take place this Saturday. And I'm not saying that it can't happen.
Yeah. I mean, that honestly would be the cherry on top to what's been an insane season with the upsets and the way the season's gone, is you have some unexpected winners in some of these championship games. I mean, that would just be, to continue that trend would be insane, but also I wouldn't expect anything less of this college football season in the first year of this 12-team playoff.
Yeah, me either, to be honest. What happens if Penn State wins and then, Army wins and Boise State loses, Clemson wins or SMU wins or, Iowa State wins, a lot of crazy things can happen, especially if Oregon would lose and Boise State would lose. That would make things very interesting, I feel like.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be very interesting to see a few of these games. You have some that are played in domes that are going to be. You have 3 of the conference championships games that are taking place in domes. That's the Big 10, Big 12, and SEC championship are in all enclosed stadiums. So weather has the chance to be a factor here. Just quickly, Boise State kickoff, 38 degrees at time of kickoff. In Boise, Idaho, you get even colder when you kick off the Tulane Army game, 27 degrees in New York, where that game will be. And then the other game, SMU Clemson, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Bank of America Stadium, 35 degrees at kickoff. So you're looking at some chilly games where that weather is going to be a factor. Don't know if there's any chance of snow. We've seen plenty of snow games already between the NFL and college already. So don't rule that out. But conference championship weekend will get started on Friday at 7 o'clock. One on Fox, one on ABC. Your choice. Boise State UNLV for the Mountain West, or Army and Tulane for the American Athletic Championship game. We'll be back next Monday to let you know if we have any madness in conference championship weekend, and we get ready to talk about who's going to be potentially in, what is the college football playoff scenarios looking like after championship game weekend. Like we said, do we have any of those scenarios we just talked about happen? Steve Mack feels the same way we do. The Ducks will crush Penn State.
Yeah.
I think we're all kind of on that same boat there. Miami's hot trash right now. As much as that may seem, it seems like they still have a chance to get it. But like we said, some of those other scenarios happen, you never know. So, get ready to buckle up, saddle in for another fun championship weekend. And we're going to find out who's in, who's out, who's going to get those automatic championship bids. Is Boise State your dark horse favorite as the group of 5 school to get that bid? We'll have all that and more next week on next week's episode of Saturday Showdown. So until then, enjoy another good weekend of college football, and we will see you then.